NIL is in the process of making recruiters be more careful when looking at the type of person they want on their team. And let me expound a little bit. So, we've talked about in the past, has NIL created the best version of college football that we've seen? Has NIL ruined college football? Well, I don't think you really have to choose between those two because I think both conditions can exist at different levels. You have to really know the players on a deeper level at this point. If you don't, you're taking a real chance because NIL is cultivating a culture of complacency, more so perhaps at these bigger schools, I believe, and shaking up the college football landscape. Don't believe me? Look at all the upsets. Look at undefeated Indiana. Look at Vandy this year, minus last week. Look at FSU struggling. Georgia isn't the same Georgia. We could say the same thing about many big programs this year. And the thing is, these kids are already getting paid. So here's where you have to be even more careful with recruiting. Once these kids get a big NIL deal, will they lose their edge? Or will it motivate them to try and solidify their legacy and obviously continue to work towards a better draft stock? If anything, it makes you work harder as a recruiter because you have to know these kids even better to kind of know where their heart is in that, which is a tough thing to measure, right? I think we're seeing a perfect example of this, and I'm going to single him out just because he's a quarterback on the team that I cheer for. But Carson Beck, where NIL has just absolutely affected them. And we can see that tangibly. You can just see it in the press conferences. He sort of laughs off the pointed questions every week and just says, we'll try harder. But then every week is more of the same struggles. But then think about it. How can you truly tell a kid that he needs to get his crap together when he's driving away from practice in a $350,000 Lamborghini?
At the speed limit, hopefully.
At the speed limit, hopefully. But in Athens, I wouldn't count on it. Um, and it's super easy to get complacent. So, in my opinion, it really takes a different kind of kid to be a success in this modern NIL era. And therefore, as a recruiter, you got to be even more discerning than usual. I don't know, just throwing that out there. I know that's a lot, but what do y'all think?
Hmm.
That's a big bite of steak to digest there, Wes.
No, I
Um,
know.
that I feel like that was a dissertation question. Like I don't feel like I can come up with a 30-second bite about how that works. I think you've got a point. I think there's a lot to be said about the relationship between recruiters and athletes at this point. And I also think that NIL thing can make kids complacent. I mean, I just signed this big old NIL deal with Ole Miss. Like, why do I need to worry about? I've already got guaranteed money, so to speak. And if I come in and kind of lay off for a bit, I'm still gonna get paid. So I mean, I can kind of see where that's coming from. But at the same time, most of these guys, especially your blue chippers, I would imagine most of them aren't going to be the complacent type. They're blue chippers for a reason. This is not something where you just wake up and be great. You have to grind at it every single day. I'm thinking of Houston County High School's quarterback, who I do radio for him, so I've seen him play every week, and I've seen how he's progressed over the last couple of years. And, he got a big NIL deal from Memphis, somewhere in the neighborhood of like $600,000 or something crazy. Like they backed up the truck to get him, and they took him over. They got him over places like Bama, Georgia, Tennessee. There were a whole bunch of schools that were after him. And that's a kid that grinds. Like that's a kid that's definitely not going to allow himself to become complacent. So I think it's a mixed bag. I think you're going to have both ends of that particular spectrum.
Yeah. And maybe more key when you're talking to, because I know they speak with the coaches as well, to try to maybe pick the high school coach's brain as to what kind of work ethic does this kid have, to
Yeah.
maybe see how they're going to respond to a situation like that. Jesse, what do you think?
Well, I think there's just eh, with NIL in general, especially as it is, it changes almost weekly, right? Like there is so much legally happening in this space that affects what we're going to continue to see. I think given the decision from the House versus NCAA that came out last month, and them combining the two cases and deciding that the NCAA and the Power Five schools were actually their practices were a violation of antitrust laws and anti-competitive laws. So they are going to do a huge payout, but without getting too legalese, what their decision does is it paves the way for revenue sharing, and it paves the way for schools to be able to pay their players directly. It starts to professionalize this, what we've known as amateur sports. The players don't have the opportunity just yet because I'm telling you, as things happen, there's going to be so many more cases that are going to come out. There's going to be Title IX cases. There's going to be labor cases that are going to come out. They're going to sue under different antitrust legislation and laws. But because the players don't have a union, there's no CBA, they can't advocate for themselves. Regardless of all that, because we are now seeing a potential for revenue sharing, I think there is a potential for schools to also have not only an interest in winning ball games, whether that be in football, men's basketball, women's basketball, softball, whatever it is, gymnastics, but they're now going to start to look for personalities that they can profit from because their profits
Mm-hmm.
are starting to get cut into because they were taking advantage of the name, image, and likeness of these athletes and profiting. And now the athletes are going to profit. But this decision is going to give them additional revenue streams if they're able to pay that player to do something and then take in more revenue. And what I mean by that is maybe they start to pay them for social campaigns. Maybe they start to do sweepstakes experiences. But additional revenue streams are about to open up for these universities with this decision and potentially with other decisions that are going to come down the line. And so there could be an interest where they're now thinking, okay, this kid has a really incredible personality. This kid can bring in a lot of NIL money. Are they the best player? I don't know. So having those like, grind kind of guys, sure, maybe they are the ones that are going to bring in that NIL money. But I think that's just another interesting factor to consider. I agree that I don't think ruining college football and making it the best that it's ever been are mutually exclusive ideas. I think it really does depend on the individual, but you're always going to have that, regardless of NIL. And more than anything, I think it's the transfer portal. People want to play, in this sense, football. People want to play football at the next level. And we've all seen it in, anywhere from like T-ball all the way up through high school, college. If they have been told they are the best, or they just think they are the best, regardless of if they are, they're going to think that they deserve to play over everybody else and they'll transfer. I think the
Right.
transfer portal is much more affecting college football. Sure, NIL is, but if you have grown up an Alabama fan, a Tennessee fan, a Georgia fan your entire life, and you want to be there and they give you a little bit of NIL money, sure, I think you'll stay. But if you want to go somewhere because you simply just want to play, I mean, we saw it with JT Daniels. I,
He
I
went
think
everywhere, man.
he went everywhere. He's played in every single conference. But I think it's the transfer portal more than NIL. And I think NIL is just going to continue to be an evolving contributor that we have to learn about. It's going to trip people up. It's going to make some people better. It's going to cause inequities. It's going to cause important discussions, but it is changing constantly. So I would say that keep up on your NIL stuff. It changes,
Yeah.
like I said, changes daily. Keep up on it because it's not as cut and dry as I think a lot of the media makes it seem.
Yeah. And to your point, Jesse, these personalities that they're trying to bring in don't always benefit the team the most. And honestly, the players that usually benefit the team the most, not always, but many times are players that necessarily don't have the greatest personality. I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, I'm sure there's many that we could come up with, but Brock Bowers, not exactly the most striking personality, but the dude makes plays and he's not super interesting off the field, but I mean, who cares if you're, a football coach?